From APM, American Public Media.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
The First Coast Relocation Guide, an annual publication dedicated to helping thousands of newcomers to Jacksonville make informed decisions. From realtors to restaurants, builders to boutiques, introduce your brand to potential customers. Info at heritagepublishinginc.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, making advanced medical directives stick. A Florida nurse turned advocate is fighting to change end-of-life care through legislation. Then, the storyteller and globetrotter behind the PBS series Fly Brother returns home to Jacksonville. We ask him about his upcoming live appearance at WJCT Studios. And a new art exhibit showcases a more inclusive history through the art and stories of the American West. Join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on social media. It's all ahead this hour after today's news.
News in Washington. I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump's sweeping tariffs are hitting the share price of many U.S. retailers and tech companies in pre-market trading. Dow futures are down 3%. The minimum tariffs are 10%. NPR's Alina Selyuk reports heavy new tariffs on China appear to have taken investors by surprise.
Companies including Walmart, Target, Amazon, and Nike are poised to lead a drop in U.S. stock markets today. These companies depend quite a bit on imports from China, for which the new 34% tariff will stack on top of the existing 20% tariffs Trump had imposed, for a total of 54% in tax. U.S. importers are on the hook to pay these new fees to receive the imports in the U.S. Many retailers have been diversifying their supply chains beyond China, but the new tariffs affect virtually every country in the world, with new levies on Vietnam, India, Cambodia, among others. Some retail giants, such as Walmart, are pressing their suppliers to shoulder some of the new costs. But generally, retailers warn they may have to raise consumer prices as a result. Alina Selyuk, NPR News.
Powerful storms are thundering across the central U.S. and parts of the Midwest. The National Weather Service is warning this is a significant weather event that is catastrophic and life-threatening. Meteorologist Mark Chenard says there have been a lot of reported tornadoes.
Preliminarily, there's been several reports of tornadoes across portions, like I said, Missouri, western Tennessee, Kentucky. Some of the damage does look to be significant.
Authorities say the storms have left 3 people dead in Missouri and Tennessee. Another tornado warning has been posted for central West Virginia. Flash flood warnings are up this morning in much of Tennessee. The National Weather Service says exceptionally heavy rain is falling in several states, and by the weekend, up to 5 or 10 more inches of rain are predicted. A senior Russian economic envoy is in Washington for talks with White House officials. The meetings come as President Trump has expressed growing frustration with the Kremlin over the pace of U.S.-backed negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. From Moscow, NPR's Charles Maines has more.
Kirill Dmitriev is the head of Russia's Sovereign Wealth Fund. He's also emerged as President Vladimir Putin's choice for Special Envoy for Economic Cooperation amid recent U.S.-Russian negotiations. Harvard-educated and formerly under U.S. sanctions, Dmitriev is expected to meet with White House envoy Steve Witkoff. The Russian envoy has been an advocate for the return of dialogue between Moscow and Washington under the Trump administration and suggested the two sides could cooperate on everything from mineral extraction to Arctic development and space exploration. Dmitriev's visit to Washington comes as Trump has said he's mulling massive tariffs on Russian oil exports if the U.S. ultimately decides Russia is dragging its feet on negotiations over Ukraine. Charles Maines, NPR News. Moscow.
On Wall Street, Dow futures are down 3%, NASDAQ futures are down 4%. It's NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. Leaders in Florida's Democratic and Republican parties spent Wednesday trying to explain what happened, why in Tuesday's special congressional elections. Here in Northeast Florida, the 6th congressional district race, Republican Randy Fine credited President Trump's endorsement of him for his victory over Democrat Josh Weil. Governor Ron DeSantis' agreement was double-edged.
It shows, the president's got the juice to be able to get Republicans to go out on Election Day and even vote for a candidate that they're not crazy about.
Meanwhile, Florida Democratic Chair Nikki Fried views Democrats' losses in the two districts in a positive light. She says that she expects the better-than-expected performances to galvanize voters around the country.
In Congressional District 6 in particular, over 60% of that district is receiving some type of services, whether it's through the VA, it's Social Security benefits, Medicare, or Medicaid. Those are the issues that are really going to be waking up the sleepy beast.
In the 6th district race, Weil raised more than $10 million while donations to Fine's campaign failed to reach $1 million, but Fine won with nearly 60% of the vote. It's going to be warm and mostly dry today here in Northeast Florida. Mostly sunny this afternoon. Highs will reach the lower 80s at the coast and around 90 inland. And we do have a low chance for rain today. Any rain that does form, it'll be gone by the evening hours. Lows will be in the mid to upper 60s overnight. Mostly cloudy to start the day tomorrow, then gradually we'll have sunny skies with warm temperatures near record highs tomorrow, with highs reaching 90 inland and 80s along the coast. And we stay warm and dry right on through the weekend.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a nurse hoping to end unnecessary suffering is pushing to change end-of-life care. We ask about her path from patients' bedsides to the halls of power. Later in the program, the host of the PBS series Fly Brother shares the path that took him from his home in Jacksonville to an exploration of the wider world. But first, during nearly 3 decades of working as an ICU and then hospice nurse, my guest has cared for many sick and dying people. And she believes the end of their lives is often unnecessarily difficult, even for those who believe that they've made a plan. Here to explain why she has hopes that a proposed law can change this is Meredith Fischer, registered nurse and graduate nursing student at the University of Florida. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So before we get into the weeds of the legislation, explain a little bit about what your experience has been dealing with people and patients at the end of their lives.
So often what I've seen in the ICU environment is people feel that they have planned for their end-of-life care wishes in the form of a living will, only to find that that is not an actionable medical order in time of an emergency. And then, the statistics show that only 1 in 3 Americans have actually filled out living wills or advance directives. And so we really want to stress the importance of having the goals of care conversations, especially when people are seriously ill and approaching end of life.
Sure. And so when you say that something isn't an actionable medical plan when they get to the end of life, most of us maybe don't know what that means. So what does that mean practically speaking?
So, living wills are legal documents that are created with your lawyer, and there's also free forms online that you can complete, such as the Honoring Choices format or the 5 Wishes format. But these are just forms that kind of guide future care that will help your family make decisions for you if you cannot make them for yourselves. And so, what this bill would do is create an actionable medical document that would be portable from setting to setting so that in times of an emergency, the EMS or first responders can actually honor this document. And it goes beyond what a DNR order would state.
A DNR is a do not resuscitate, but I want to stick with the living will because that is something a lot of people do create. Not enough people, but a lot of people do. And so you're saying that that can be used to guide family members about what care you might like to receive, but it isn't necessarily something that a doctor can look to as a directive saying, this is what you should do, this is what you are being told to do, and act upon that and be protected when they act upon it based on those recommendations.
Not in times of emergency. Certainly, once you are in a healthcare facility, the family can present the living will, or maybe it's already uploaded to their electronic registry, and then they can look for it to help guide decision making once you're already there. But in times of emergencies, they are not going to be able to interpret that document to guide those critical decisions.
And so when somebody is in a state of emergency, and you've seen this happen many times, tell us what is happening. Even if somebody's advance directive says, look, I don't want aggressive treatment at end of life, but an emergency happens. What happens automatically then?
So the default is to do everything. So if someone is at home and they have an elderly family member and they have a living will in a file cabinet, maybe they don't have one at all, but you've had a conversation that the your family member would not want CPR or taken to the hospital or any number of interventions. Um, Oftentimes, these documents, if they do have them, they're outdated, and like I say, they can't find them, and they're not actionable. So we need a document for this vulnerable population that are seriously ill, medically fragile. They need a way to translate their medical wishes into an immediately actionable medical order. And most states have already done this.
It is more than, I would guess, just frustrating for family members or care providers like yourself to see extraordinary measures taken or aggressive interventions made when you know that someone specifically doesn't want that. Can you just talk a little bit about what you've seen family members go through or what you and your colleagues have experienced?
So I'm not a first responder, so I'm there kind of, after for the aftercare in the ICU environment in my past. But there's first responders I've spoken to say, if they arrive on scene and they cannot find their DNR order, the first responders are required to do everything and perform CPR on that individual. So this bill would create an electronic registry, which would help fill in some of those gaps, so that first responders could find out what the person's wishes are before they arrive on scene, and they can act upon them because they're assigned medical order.
So, what is happening though for the people who are doing those interventions when they know that they perhaps ought not to, that the patient doesn't want it? Or what are family members? How are they receiving that when that's happening?
They're very angry. They will be telling the first responders, please don't do this. They do not want it. And without that actionable medical order, they have to perform those interventions.
And I would guess that that is a very difficult situation to be in.
It's very distressful because, ultimately we want our family members to receive the kind of care that they want. And as a nurse, and this is why I'm here, is because I am a patient advocate. I want our patients to receive the kind of care that they want. And people that are in that phase of life and that are seriously ill, multiple hospitalizations. Most of this population, when you survey them, the statistics show that 80% of this population, they prefer to avoid aggressive end-of-life interventions. Florida ranks, unfortunately, one of the top states in the nation for aggressive end-of-life care in the last 12 months of life. The Dartmouth Atlas Project in 2023 states that Florida is sixth in the nation for aggressive end-of-life care in the last 12 months.
Meaning likelier to deliver that kind of aggressive intervention at the end. And so you talk about a DNR, that's a do not resuscitate order. That is a medically recognized legal document, but it's lacking in a lot of ways that people are not aware of. First and foremost, something that you told me but before that we started here is that it's limited in terms of the kinds of interventions it prohibits, things that are very specific, CPR, intubation. There, beyond that, there's all kinds of things that could be done. Can you just sort of explain why the DNR is limited and the ways in which it's limited?
So there's, you know, all types of aggressive interventions that people want to avoid. Sometimes people do not want to go to the hospital. So a DNR does not mean do not treat. A DNR is limited to interventions when someone doesn't have a pulse or they're not breathing. So I have an example here with me today. This is the document from Georgia, and they call it POST. In Florida, we're set to call it a patient-directed medical order. But the POST document in Georgia has they're all very similar across the nation, and they address whether you want antibiotics, whether you want a feeding tube, whether you want IV hydration, and it goes kind of beyond that to limited IV hydration for a period of time or a trial period of artificial nutrition.
So you can be very
You
specific.
can be very specific. And then it has comfort measures, limited interventions, or full treatment. So it's the whole spectrum of the kind of care that you want.
I think it's important too to let people know that in any case, these directives are not used if you are able to speak for yourself.
Correct.
They don't take over if
Correct.
you are conscious and wanting to change your mind. They are always something that you can modify if you are able.
Right.
Okay. We're talking about legislation to provide changes to how end of life care is delivered here in Florida. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We have a call from Charles on the west side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I had a procedure 2 weeks ago at St. Vincent's, and when I had to sign my consent form, down at the bottom where it had the option for DNR, there was like a little parenthesis off to the side that said something to the effect of must be approved by the state of Florida or by the state of Florida or something like that I had never seen before. It's like, you know, somebody had to check off on my wishes or something. Can you tell me what that was about?
So what I believe that was referring to is that in order for a DNR order form in the state of Florida to be valid, it must be on yellow paper and it must be signed by your healthcare provider. So there's a process that you have to go through to make that form valid rather than just that checkbox on the bottom of your admission form.
We also have a question from Michelle. She asked if the bill that's being proposed would hold nursing facilities accountable for not pointing out a posted DNR. We know that, you know, nursing facilities have a lot of responsibilities. If first responders are coming in, it is possible sometimes, I would guess, that a posted DNR or a DNR that's on file might not always be communicated to a first responder. Is there anything that tries to compel people who are running a facility like that, compel them to communicate that to first responders?
There is no legislation that penalizes a facility for misplacing the document or not honoring the document. You know, it's really up to the families to voice their concerns if something is not followed. I had that happen with one of my friends' family members just this past summer. The facility could not find his DNR. And what this legislation would do, and he ended up intubated, all the things that he did not want. But this legislation would provide that electronic registry so that even before first responders arrive on scene, they can find out what their wishes are before they get there. And it is actionable. They can act upon the wishes they see uploaded to the registry because it is a signed medical order.
So there's not this fumbling looking for
Correct.
the DNR. It's on file with the state, and all of these medical professionals would have access to it.
Correct.
Yeah. It is then actionable, meaning that, you know, they can act upon it, but this bill would also offer some protections. Can you sort of explain why that's important if a first responder is acting on a medical order like this, that they be insulated from civil penalties or lawsuits or even criminal penalties?
Right. So the Florida Do Not Resuscitate order that is filled out correctly is provides the medical professionals with immunity from prosecution for honoring the document. So if the medical professional is presented with this document, it is properly filled out, they are protected for honoring what is on there. So that would be the same for this new legislation. If there was a Florida created patient directed medical order, then the individuals honoring this document would be protected from prosecution.
All right. So I want to talk just about how we kind of got here with this legislation, because as we mentioned, you're a nursing student, you're going for your advanced degree, but you've worked for a number of years. And now all of a sudden you're, an advocate in Tallahassee, you're pushing for legislation. How did you make that jump?
So it's interesting. I've been a bedside nurse for 28 years now, and I made the transition from the ICU to hospice about 10 years ago. And coincidentally, about 10 years ago, I was flying cross country from the Pacific Northwest back to Florida, and I heard a group of people, or a couple of people, discussing this document, the Pulse document, that most states already have. And they were also mentioning that Florida doesn't currently have this. So fast forward to where I am today, and I'm back in school to pursue a Doctor of Nursing Practice degree with the University of Florida. I want to be a nurse practitioner. A healthcare policy class had us write a letter to a legislator to voice our support for a healthcare policy that we're passionate about. And I did that, and to my surprise, I received a response within a few hours asking to meet with me to discuss this issue. So that's kind of how I got connected with the key leaders in this state to promote this legislation. There were already bills in the works. So I have now been collaborating with them for a year and a half to get the grassroots support to get this legislation over the finish line.
And so you had to, this was an effort that started more than a year ago for you. Initially, there was some resistance from some lobbying groups associated with nurses. You were able to kind of modify, address the concerns that they had, go through the procedures that they require. And so this now is a bill that is widely supported. What is the current status of it in Tallahassee? What's happening with it?
So we need to get it on the healthcare committee agendas. So if they do not hear it in the healthcare committees, the bill cannot advance to the next steps. So that's what we need now, is we need them to put it on the agenda to be discussed in the healthcare committees.
Do we know why it's not being scheduled?
Some of the lawmakers in Tallahassee are not aware of how important this legislation is. So it's just simply not on their priority. And so we need to educate them to help them understand why this healthcare legislation is so important. We need to discuss it. We need to get it on the agenda.
It is one of those things that I would guess a lot of people are unaware of until they encounter it themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there has been some questions raised, about concerns that this could be a slippery slope. I don't know how widely discussed those are, but people are always concerned when it comes to end-of-life care that somehow you might be stepping on someone's rights. Somehow this could be advancing more of a agenda similar to euthanasia. Can you kind of address, how this differs from a kind of volitional life-ending
Right.
opportunity as opposed to just kind of a medical care directive?
So this legislation really empowers patients to get the kind of care that they want. So, like, for example, this post from Georgia says, I want full treatment. So a DNR order specifies that they do not want any life-saving interventions in the form of CPR. So this form is not about euthanasia. This form is about giving a person the agency and the ability to specify what kind of wishes they do want and what kind of medical interventions they do not want.
Because nobody is required to accept medical care, but the medical system is as you say, set up almost as a default to do those interventions unless you tell them not to.
Right.
Yeah. So there is an element of this bill that I was interested in because it does specifically say that necessary healthcare services will be provided regardless of decisions to withhold or withdraw life-saving procedures. So basically, even if a first responder is being told, don't deliver these intubations, don't perform CPR, the bill also still provides for what's considered necessary healthcare services. That's just basic, like care, of a person. Is that kind of what that specifies?
I'm not completely sure I follow the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. I mean, this is actually something that I wanted to address with you before we sat down. So the bill says that it mandates necessary healthcare services be provided regardless of decisions to withhold or withdraw life-prolonging procedures.
Right. It doesn't mean don't care for the individual. This is about the care that they do want. It's not about the care. It's not about limiting care. It's about giving the kind of care that aligns with their goals and wishes. So it really gives people the ability to align if they have a living will. It gives them the ability to translate that living will into a medical order that can be followed.
Has this debate become any more significant in kind of the post-pandemic era? Do you think that there is any more awareness that brought to people about, how people are receiving healthcare at the end of life? Just kind of that broader experience with mass illness like that.
I think so. I think so. And what's interesting is a lot of the conferences I go to and the people I talk to that have lived in other states, they're like, oh, yeah, we had this document in the state where I'm from, and it was so helpful. Sometimes there are healthcare providers in other states, and they're like, I can't believe Florida doesn't have this already.
Mm-hmm.
So just getting the awareness of how this can help our patients get the kind of care that they want is my goal, to educate people why this bill is important and why we need it.
We have a call from Mark in St. Augustine. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Good morning. I've been a nurse for the last 15 or 20 years in many different settings, hospital, bedside. I spent a year in ICU. Now I'm at a skilled nursing facility. But I've seen this, and this is kind of interesting. You'll have a patient that has a DNR, it's a yellow page with the black, it's filled out perfectly. And then you get a relative come in to see the dying next of kin and say, no, we don't want that. All life-saving measures. And more often than you would believe, the doctor will say, okay, hold on here. Let's, full measures until they get this sorted out, even though you have that document. And that's always kind of amazed me, but you see it frequently. So does she have any comment about that?
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about. So with advanced care planning, the number one thing that they tell you in the beginning is choose your healthcare decision proxy carefully. And if they cannot honor your wishes, you need to choose someone else. For example, I'm not sure that my husband could follow my wishes. And so oftentimes people may designate their neighbor because they have the conversation with their friend. They tell them, these are my wishes. I know that my family would not be capable of honoring my wishes, so I'm going to designate you. And so having that conversation with your family, designating the person that can honor your wishes is vitally important to having your wishes honored.
I wonder if you think that we just all need to know a little bit more about what some end-of-life outcomes are. I mean, when people are fighting for their loved ones in those final hours and saying, we want everything done, they may not know what everything done looks like or kind of whether those actions would actually have any benefit long-term, actually be sustaining, whether their loved one would be perhaps in a different kind of pain. I mean, things like CPR can cause all kinds of damage, for instance, on someone's, body.
Broken ribs.
Sure.
Right. So there's a lot out there, a lot of books, a lot of documentaries. There's a great book called Being Mortal um, uh, that talks about this issue. And what some people have said is, in the U.S., we're not living longer, we're dying longer.
Mm.
So all of these interventions, sometimes they're just prolonging death. And really, what we want to do is promote goal concordant care and quality of life. And the states that have this document have shown that these individuals have better quality of life.
Sure, because I mean, there can also be a life that is saved and then sort of just remains in a static circumstance for a long, long time. That can often be a lot harder for families.
Correct.
Yeah. We've got a call from Lily on the north side. Good morning, Lily. Go ahead.
Hi.
Lily, I think we may have lost you. Are you there? You there, Lily?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi. I am calling with a question regarding hospitals' internal policies. I know that Baptist Downtown, they have a policy where even if a patient comes in with a yellow physician-signed DNR, they will not acknowledge that per se on its own. They will require the patient to sign an additional internal document to make it valid for their hospital. And it's called a A&D form, allow natural death. So there's actually 3 options. You can be a full code, a A&D with active treatment, or just like a regular DNR. And it's often confusing to the patients, and it's confusing as a nurse because there are little caveats. It seems like it overcomplicates the DNR process. You can have I want if my heart stops, I want chest compressions, but I don't want to be intubated. Or if my heart stops, I don't want to be intubated. I want chest compressions, but I don't want any medications. So what would this policy do for that? Would it make it so that everything was streamlined, that their facilities would have to just honor the yellow DNR that the patient has?
This policy, this bill would not change those internal documents at your healthcare facilities. Every healthcare facility is different in what they require internally. So this document, its value is really in the outside the acute care setting before the patient arrives, so that first responders know what their wishes are immediately. And then it can also guide care for patients and their family members once they arrive to an acute care facility. But really, we need to not get the patients on the aggressive care kind of treadmill, if you will, kind of upstream before they arrive to the facility.
We also have a call from Rosemary in St. Augustine. Good morning, Rosemary. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is about the actual doctors, because I had a sister that had a DNR and no extreme measures. And when they said she was having trouble breathing, they were going to put her on not the tube that goes down your throat, but something that goes over your mouth and your nose. And then 2 weeks later, they told me that was an extreme measure. So because they didn't tell me in advance, I said, okay.
Right. This is challenging. So this is where these goals of care conversations before someone is unable to speak for themselves is so important. So having that conversation, designating the person that will speak for you on your behalf once you cannot. Because as the caller pointed out earlier, if your designated healthcare person cannot honor your wishes, your forms are not going to save you. You're going to have to designate the right person, but you need the right forms in place in advance.
So what are you advising folks to do if they care about this issue or they want to see this legislation move forward?
You need to contact your legislators. Everybody needs to call and write and tell them to get it on the healthcare agenda, to get it um, heard in committee so that we can move this bill to the next step. We need people's stories to share with these legislators so that they know how important this legislation is.
So this is House Bill 353, Senate Bill 566?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, Meredith Fischer. It's a pleasure to meet you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, the storyteller and globetrotter behind the PBS series Fly Brother returns home to Jacksonville. Welcome back. Well, his first airplane trip at 13 kindled a passion that evolved into a globe-spanning travel career and a television career. Joining me to discuss his journey from Jacksonville to his success as the executive producer and host of the PBS travel program Fly Brother is Ernest White II. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. What brings you back to town?
Well, I'm here for a few reasons. One, to see my family. I try to see them quarterly. But I'm also here for an event that we're having on Monday here at the studio.
Yep.
It's Fly Brother and Friends live event in concert with WJCT and Morris Travel Group. And then also I'm filming a documentary about my mother who taught swimming for several decades at the Johnson Branch YMCA. So all of that's
Pearl.
happening. Yes, Pearl My World is the name of the
Oh, my world. That was your mom.
Pearl White. Yes,
No kidding.
yes, that's right.
So that's an extraordinary project. I mean, she taught many, many people to swim in the city.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
And she was the aquatics director at the Johnson Branch YMCA. She worked with Mr. Ginyard, who was one of the teachers that taught at the Jefferson Street Pool in the 1950s. And yeah, she had a lot of amazing team members that she worked with, Lawrence Jones at the Y, and they taught thousands of kids.
I mean, she came to that sort of after a near tragedy, right?
That's right. Actually, when she was a child, she had fallen into the St. Johns River and almost drowned. But, she turned that into her own kind of place of solace and peace and helped other people with a life skill, but also the ability to think bigger and broader than what they could have ever imagined.
So that's cool. That's sort of a side project.
That was a
and,
segue.
and that's
I
that's
digress.
great. But I guess it's fascinating to people. I don't think anybody that necessarily would ever think like this guy's from Jacksonville. I mean, you're so traveled, you're so worldly. You are have this program that takes you to the most exotic locations in the
Mhm.
world. But it all started right here. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of got your spark for travel?
Sure. Well, listen, I've always been interested in different cultures and languages. I remember going to Disney World as a kid and seeing the signs that were written in Spanish. I didn't know anything about Spanish. I just knew that one of the N's had like a little squiggle on top of it, and the letter Y was its own word. And those things just really captured my attention. And my parents, being teachers, were always very supportive of that kind of curiosity. They brought me books. And any map that I wanted to get, they would buy it for me. And so I really was always kind of drawn to geography and just people of different experiences and different expressions. And so coming from that, but also watching my parents engage with people as equals. They grew up here in Jacksonville. They grew up in segregation, but I never heard them judge an entire group of people by the actions of one person. They showed me how to be out in the world, and they also taught me how to, they gave me home training. They taught me how to respectfully embody myself in other places. And my community here, growing up at Bethel Baptist Institutional Church, right here downtown, and other organizations where I was forced to open my mouth and not mumble, to speak, to talk to people who might be from a different demographic, maybe not racially, but certainly age-wise, just engage from a place of knowing and again, curiosity, openness, and respect. And that was what allowed me to kind of go out into the world with these very Southern cultural traits and create community wherever I go.
The hallmark, I think, of your show is just kind of this intimacy that you build with the people that host you, that show you around, and you're always, greeting people with a hug. I mean, you're a very kind of, animated, friend forward
Thank you. It's the
tourist.
coffee.
So, first of all, is that something that just kind of comes naturally to you? Is it because travel can be challenging, it can be difficult, it can be hard to meet new people? How do you kind of greet all of those things with this embrace?
I think it's just in me to look for our similarities and therefore look for ways to connect. I feel safest when I see that I am seen. When, even if that's just a nod, even if it's just like a shared smile, or something interesting happens and there's some kind of banter between people who don't necessarily know each other, but recognize each other as human beings, no matter how they look, no matter where they're from. That's what that's what really excites me about being out in the world. And granted, there are some times that I don't feel like talking. There are times when I just kind of want to hermit. But when I'm out in the world, I want to be connected to the people in it. And that's, I think, having done that over the years constantly, it's built up the habit in me of doing it easily and being able to show other people how to do it.
And you do some kind of building on networks that exist already too. I know that there was a recent trip that you took. I think it was to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where you're connecting with a fellow rattler. That
Yes.
you guys had this FAMU background, and you were able to kind of like, connect about that, but then also about this new place that you were both in.
Oh, yes, my friend Isis Dukes, who I have known since we were both 18 years old, when she told I love Isis. One of the first things she said to me was that I am a pillar of the community from Atlanta, where she grew up, because her father, I think, was the fire chief of Decatur, Georgia. And so I've always known characters. I've always known people who've had wonderful personalities. And I think in that, seeking out those connections, you find those types of people in every culture, in every background. And so when I do go to different places, it's the looking for that familiarity that I feel like is it's what I like to do.
You've lived in a number of other countries as well. I mean, so you're not just a traveler. You really do and go inhabit these spaces in some cases. And I'm just curious your thoughts about, living in a different place like that. You can kind of get to know a community, but still there's always so much history. There's always so much there. It's hard to really truly understand a place. I wonder if there's like stages that you go through where you feel like you understand it kind of just that little bit more, and how long it takes to reach those different milestones.
No, I think that's a really good question. I am a nerd at heart. So I love reading. I love knowing the history of a place. I love knowing kind of what's come before in order to have a better understanding of what I'm experiencing in the moment. And so I generally, before going to a place, try to read up on its history, and be very aware and kind of open to what I'm learning, what inputs are happening. And that also helps me to connect with people, because I do have things that I can talk about. I can ask them questions about what I've read and get their perspective on it. Sometimes it's different, the story that I get from someone that I've met. But it really helps me feel like I've got a better grasp on just the environment in which I'm swimming. It's not, I feel like I'll never understand a place completely. I'm still understanding myself, and places are like people. They change. There are, they might have been one way when I was a certain way at a certain age in a particular place. as you mentioned, I've lived in 7 countries, actually lived and worked in 7 countries, and I've traveled to over 70. I have friends that have been to twice as many, but the point is every time you go back to a place, it's new because I'm new.
Yeah. Yeah. And places do change. I'm curious what changes you see when you come back to Jacksonville. You don't live in the States anymore, right? You live in Canada right now?
Yes, I live in Canada. I live in Vancouver for the moment, but I'm actually considering a move to Ottawa.
Oh, wow.
It's an interesting place, and it's on this side of the continent. Puts me closer to my family, but also closer to New York and Toronto when I need to be there for business. But the main thing is that when I come back here to Jacksonville, one of the constants is always that community that I go back to. So whenever I go come home to see my family and then go to Bethel and go to other places, I very much reconnect with that vibranium that allows me to go out into the world and be kind of radiant and shiny. I see the city constantly kind of growing with regard to just more people moving here, and it's interesting too because I have seen a larger diversity amongst the population. You can you can get really good, Thai, Indian, Ethiopian food that you might not have been able to get when I was growing up.
Yeah. You have a weakness for Thai food, I
I love
understand.
it.
um, so you have been a journalist for a long time. You started this show right around the pandemic. I'm sure
Hmm.
a great time to be doing a travel show, but the world has also changed a lot in recent years
Yes.
and even just in recent months in terms of relations with other countries.
Hmm.
That's something that seems very dynamic right now. How in the time that you've been doing this show has perhaps perceptions of people from the United States changed? How has your welcome changed, if at all, in that time?
Well, I'll say this. In Canada, no, nothing has changed in my day-to-day interaction with people simply because either they know me and they know me personally, and so that's not a big issue. I do believe that people in general want to believe the best. I don't think that always is the case, but I do think that people try to. I'm getting feedback
Oh,
in my
I'm not hearing anything,
Okay, no
so
worries then.
you sound
But
good.
yeah, so sometimes I feel like, in terms of my interaction with people, I don't feel like there's been a major difference with regard to me being American and people looking to me as being responsible for any of the changes that have happened. However, I don't know how long that would last. I will say when I traveled in the Middle East for the very first time back in the early 2000s, sometimes I did not offer that I was from the United States first off, and I would put on a little accent and try to pass as someone from Latin America, just to kind of make let's say, make those interactions a bit easier.
Mhm.
However, eventually I realized that I was being inauthentic, and when I started telling people I was from the States, I only got love. People were like, "Oh my goodness," like, and they would talk about their favorite film, and I realized I was being unnecessarily fearful.
Mhm. And what do you feel any different kind of sense of obligation now going forward with your travel? Do you think that there'll be a greater weight that you carry, um, knowing that there may be some additional, feelings about the United States?
Well, I'm a Black American, I'm a gay American. I've always, my very existence is political, no matter how I feel about it, because someone's going to have some opinion about me based on immutable characteristics.
Mm.
Um, so I don't feel like there's any additional weight because I came here lifting heavy weights and I'm stronger for it.
Yeah. So this event that is coming here on Monday is going to have some sneak peeks at your upcoming season, season 4.
That's right. We're going
Um,
into season 4 right now.
what are some of the destinations that people are going to see in this upcoming season?
In the upcoming season, I can only speak to one so far,
Okay.
and that is Switzerland. We
Huh.
filmed in Geneva, St. Gallen, and the province, the canton of Ticino. So we hit the major language regions of Switzerland on what we call the Grand Tour, and we went to those 3 different places by road. and had three amazing storytellers who have a deep connection to the country. One of them is a basketball player, an NBA player who grew up in Geneva. Another one is a film and television director whose father was from St. Gallen. And the third is an industrial designer and creative director who went to school in the Italian-speaking part.
Well, it is going to be a great event. Ernest White II. It is at WJCT Studios. It's from 6:30 to 9 on Monday. Tickets are available. There'll be food. There'll be an opportunity to get some packing tips.
That's right.
Which I really want to have.
Take half the clothes and twice the money.
That's it. Oh, all right.
That's a good tip.
On the next Florida Roundup, we will have a live studio audience from Jacksonville. It's the first city to criminalize illegal immigration, but it's not law just yet. How should a city enforce federal immigration laws? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. Plus, a former WNBA commissioner has been exploring bringing a team to Jacksonville. Got any suggestions for a team name? Email radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then join us Friday noon until 1.
Bury me where the wind
On the next Fresh Air, songwriter, singer, and guitarist Jason Isbell, who is described in Variety as the poet laureate of American rock. He won 9 Americana Music Awards and 6 Grammys. His new solo album includes songs about the breakup of his marriage to singer-songwriter and violinist Amanda Shires. Join us
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Still got so much to learn.
The United States desperately needs more merchant mariners.
They're literally shifting crew from vessel to vessel to keep it operating. They're actually getting waivers in some points to operate the ships below minimum crewing levels.
The Merchant Marine is sometimes referred to as the fourth arm of national defense, so we'll look at how the mariner shortage could impact maritime security. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
They're called America's Best.
Welcome back. Well, a new traveling exhibition at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens is challenging the myths and stereotypes of American Western art narratives. Joining me to talk about how the exhibit came together is Kim Kudadring, Director of Learning and Engagement at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens. Good morning, Kim.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by on the telephone by Mindy Besaw. Mindy Besaw, Curator of Knowing the West, which is the exhibit. Good morning, Mindy. Welcome.
Good morning.
So, Mindy, if you could just tell us what inspired this exhibition in the first place. I understand it took a long time to kind of research and develop and bring together.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is an exhibition about 5 years in the making. I co-curated the exhibition with Jamie Powell, who is an Osage Nation citizen. She is at the Hood Museum at Dartmouth College. And we brought together an advisory board to really help us think through what is the right balance? How do we tell this complex and diverse and really wonderful story about the American West? So we had that great help, and it resulted in about 120 objects from saddles and paintings and sculpture and textile and beadwork. And so that is a little bit of how it came about.
And so the idea here, I guess, is to broaden the definition and our understanding of what art in the context of the American West is. What is it that typically gets overlooked in the stories that we tell about the artwork from that period and that part of the world?
Yeah, I think some of it is what specifically gets overlooked. For example, art contributions by African Americans. There's a selection of pottery by H. Wilson and Company, which was a group of men who were formerly enslaved. And in 1869, they formed a pottery company in Texas. It was the first Black-owned business. So there are some individual stories like that that often get overlooked. Otherwise, it's really seeing the art in context. So often, Native American art is grouped together as one holistic thing, denying that there are more than 500 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And then the art by European Americans gets put in a very separate place. And so part of the goal of the exhibition is to really see the cross-cultural exchange and dialogue when you put the artwork side by side and in conversation.
And one of the things that this exhibition does, Kim, is it shows us that the definition of art is much broader than a painting or a photograph. That there are a variety of, particularly things like textiles, that are incredibly detailed, skilled, and very beautiful pieces of art on their own. Can you talk about some of the sort of non-traditional art forms that we see at this exhibition?
Sure. And I might lean on Mindy a little bit because I love when she tells the stories of the 5 saddles. So saddle, meaning on a horse, person riding a horse. And she tells a story about some of the community advisors and how they were investigating different objects that would tell the more complete story than many people might already understand. And one person said, you can easily do this by showcasing 5 different saddles. And so there are some Native American saddles in there. Some are very intricate with beautifully detailed beadwork. Almost looks like something that no one really would sit on because it just looks so precious and beautiful and fragile. There's another by a different Native American tribe that you see a lot of the rawhide, and there is a high area in where the front of the person would be, but then it also raises up in the back, and then there's beautiful beadwork in the stirrups and in the front, and there's a martingale, which is something that the horse would wear as well. Beautifully beaded, detailed work for the horse, and that was specifically a woman's saddle. And so we've been, and Mindy, I do not know if this is correct, but we've been joking at the museum that, oh, yeah, definitely. The women were probably more practical and would want that little bit of a backrest on the saddle to just help keep them stable. So it's objects like that that are really intriguing and fascinating and somewhat surprising because we don't necessarily, we consider them more functional rather than artistic or artworks. And I think that's what this exhibition does so well, is it really introduces the totality of people's experiences living in the West, not just creating art for art's sake and to depict beauty, but baby cradles that would take 9 months for an entire community of women to create for the baby that was about to be born. And there's a variety of materials and sizes and structures, but they all have the same function, and they have a wide diversity of beauty inherent within them. So I really encourage everyone to come to the museum and see this exhibition. It's really stunning, and we like to ask the question, thanks to Mindy and her team, of how do you know the West? How do you know the American West?
Mhm.
And that could be through movies, through books, through stories, through growing up there, through visiting. And probably 9.5 times out of 10 at the end of the exhibition, people's ideas of the West may have evolved a little bit. They might have grown. And as new stories get introduced.
Yeah. Well, the exhibit is on display through August 31st. There's more info at cummermuseum.org. Kim Kudadring, Mendy Bissaw, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
All right. Join us tomorrow when we talk about all the week's headlines with our panel of journalists, from special election takeaways to more shrimping in local waters. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. The Florida Ombudsman Program, seeking volunteers to help advocate for Florida's most vulnerable residents, those in nursing homes or other long-term care settings. Training is provided. Information is available at 888-831-0404.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
The United States desperately needs more merchant mariners.
They're literally shifting crew from vessel to vessel to keep it operating. They're actually getting waivers in some point.
At NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hi, I'm Jen White. Today on 1A, our public lands. People visited national park sites a record 331 million times last year. But after the Trump administration delayed